Welcome to the October edition of This Month in Payroll for 2025. I'm Rowan Geddes, National Leader of PwC's Payroll Advisory Practice. Last month was a milestone month with the handing down of the Coles-Woolworths decision. This month, we have the release of the draft Payday Super legislation. So, Payday Super will be the major topic covered this month. In addition, we'll provide updates on portable leave and long service leave, an update on the Infosys case. We'll also provide details on the latest Workforce Leaders Forum, and we're going to finish off with a farewell. This month, the federal government finally introduced Payday Super legislation into Parliament, confirming a start date of 1 July 2026. As a reminder, Payday Super is designed to align the payment of superannuation guarantee contributions with an employer's pay cycle, rather than the current quarterly requirement. It is a key plank in the government's goal of addressing unpaid superannuation, which is currently estimated to total nearly $5.6 billion a year. An exposure draft of the legislation was released in March of this year and was then the subject of a consultation process, which saw 168 submissions received and a further 6 industry roundtables held. The bill takes into account much of the feedback provided through the consultation period. It also includes some transitional arrangements, noting the short time frame to be ready for the kickoff. So, what has changed? Business days versus calendar days. The initial exposure draft required that, subject to certain exceptions, SG contributions be made within 7 calendar days of payday, which was likely to cause significant issues during pay periods which included public holidays. Recognising the problems that this would cause, the government has now changed this to be 7 business days from payday. Note, however, that SG contributions must be able to be allocated to a superannuation fund before the end of the 7th business day after the payday. The term able to be allocated is a new concept within the Payday Super regime and means that a superannuation fund must be able to identify and allocate the contribution to an employee's fund using details provided by an employer. If a contribution is rejected by the fund based on incorrect or incomplete details, the contribution is not able to be allocated. Second, exceptional circumstances. The government also acknowledged concerns raised through the consultation process that employers risked facing penalties for delays and errors where bounce-backs arose because of the actions of employees, clearinghouses or super funds, rather than issues that the employers themselves could control. As a reminder, the exposure draft included extensions to the 7-day deadline where 1. A contribution was to a new employee, allowing additional time for onboarding. 2. Contributions to the tax office advised staple funds were rejected. 3. A payment was an out-of-cycle earnings payment, such as a bonus. Or 4. There were exceptional circumstances, natural disasters, widespread technology issues. In response to the concerns raised for consultation, the government has introduced an additional exception, being a 20 business days extension for all instances where an employer is required to change the fund they are contributing to for an employee, ensuring employers are given enough time to perform the necessary steps to identify the new fund they should contribute to, validate the correct details for the employer's account, and to comply with the choice of fund rules. And the government has proposed other changes to minimise the errors of bounce-backs arising from outside of an employer's control, including changing the stapled fund process to allow an employer to request stapled fund details from the tax office before, at, or after an employee is offered a choice of funds. Currently, this request can only be made after the offer, causing delays to the onboarding process. Upgrading SuperStream to improve upfront validation of employer details and to standardise the error messaging framework so that any errors can be quickly identified and remediated. The third change is maximum contributions base. Another change included in the Payday Super bill is that the maximum contributions base cap will change from being assessed quarterly to being assessed annually. This means that employees may reach the MCB early in the financial year, requiring consideration around the impact that this will have on an employer's remuneration policy. What happens once an employee maxes out their MCB? In addition, as employees are now able to reach the MCB early in the financial year, it is possible that employees who change roles during the year may have already maxed out their MCB when they start with a new employer. To address this, a shortfall exemption certificate can now be requested where an employee changes employers partway through the year. The shortfall exemption certificate was previously applicable only where an employee worked for 2 or more employers concurrently. And the final change is penalties. Remembering that the Payday Super regime is about reducing the $5.6 billion superannuation compliance gap, it's to be expected that it includes a new penalty approach, which gives the tax office more power and includes higher penalties. First, the Commissioner of Taxation will now have the ability to proactively levy an SG shortfall on an employer, based purely on data it gathers from data matching activities undertaken using single-touch payroll and superannuation fund reporting. To assist with the data matching, there are also changes proposed to STP reporting to include qualifying earnings and the associated SG liability. Second, SGC will now comprise of the final SG shortfall, interest, now called notional earnings, and an administrative uplift component of up to 60% of the SG shortfall. In welcome news at least, employers will now be able to claim the SG and late superannuation payments as an income tax deduction. Penalties and general interest charges on unpaid SGC amounts will remain non-deductible. But the increase in the administrative uplift is significant. It is currently capped at $20 per employee per quarter. Partial remission, though, is available of the administrative uplift component, provided a disclosure is made voluntarily, that is, the tax office has not previously initiated contact, and the remission is made in a prompt and timely manner. Within 30 days of payday generates the highest remission. So, implementing a system that can identify and correct late payments of SG via a disclosure to the tax office now becomes extremely important. Recognising that employers may face challenges in meeting the new regulatory environment, the tax office has released a draft practical compliance guide, which outlines its compliance approach for the first year. Under the PCG, employers will be categorised into 3 risk zones. Low risk, where an employer has made a late contribution but attempts to correct it as soon as reasonably practicable. Medium risk, where an employer recognises and corrects SG shortfalls by 28 days after the end of the quarter in which the earnings were paid. And high risk, where SG shortfall issues remain more than 28 days after the end of the quarter in which the earnings were paid. The tax office has advised that in the first year, there will be no ATO review over low-risk employers. An ATO review may be possible for medium-risk employers, while high-risk employers will be a high compliance priority. These concessions will give employers the time to take steps to comply with the Payday Super changes up until the 1st of July 2027. While there's been no guidance from the tax office about what happens after this date, we expect that a firmer approach will be adopted, and therefore we encourage employers to start preparing for Payday Super now. This would involve documenting the existing compliance framework across the superannuation lifecycle to understand employee onboarding, the causes of bounce backs, and the error reporting process. Performing a technology review, including ensuring appropriate upgrades are made to payroll systems and review of the current system mapping for superannuation and STP reporting, and examining arrangements with clearinghouses to understand KPIs and identify any internal processes that impact clearinghouse turnaround times. 2026 is shaping up to be a big year for payroll. Given this, we are delighted to announce that Emma Rosenzweig, the ATO Deputy Commissioner, newly appointed to lead the implementation of Payday Super program, will join us for the next Workforce Leaders Forum on Tuesday the 18th of November at 3 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time. Emma will discuss steps that employers should be taking to ready themselves for this new regime. You can register for the forum via the link on your screen. And now on to other topics, starting with portable leave. South Australia has become the latest state to expand its portable long service leave scheme to include community workers, following Victoria, New South Wales, Queensland and the ACT. The South Australian Portable Long Service Leave Scheme for the community services sector commenced on 1 October 2025. Affected South Australian employers must register with the scheme, report eligible workers' service and wages on a quarterly basis, and pay a 2.2% levy on total wages. The first employer return will be due by 21 January 2026 for the quarter ended December 2025. The new portable long service leave scheme will cover workers providing community services and workers supporting the delivery of community services. To qualify, employees must spend at least 50% of their time performing duties covered by either the SHADS Award or the Aboriginal Legal Rights Movements Award, and deliver or support community services such as disability support, homelessness services, youth justice, family and domestic violence services, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander services, and community legal services. Note that eligibility for the South Australian Portable Long Service Leave Scheme is not limited to frontline workers. Employees in roles such as administration, HR, payroll, finance or management may also qualify if at least 50% of their duties support community service delivery. The new scheme carries with it significant non-compliance penalties of up to $10,000 per contravention. Therefore, affected South Australian employers should review their workforce to determine which employees fall within the scheme and confirm their payroll systems are able to track and report employee services and wages on a quarterly basis. There will also be increased record-keeping requirements around employment contracts, job descriptions, timesheets and payslips. And while we're on the topic of long service leave, this month we drew to a conclusion a long-running long service leave case dealing with the continuity of service. We spoke last year about the case of Fox versus Infosys Technologies Limited. An Infosys employee, Mr. Narendra Gade, worked for Infosys in India for 6 years and then in Victoria for nearly 4 years. He resigned having completed 10 years of service between the two locations. For the purposes of continuous service, it had previously been ruled by the courts in another Infosys case that in Victoria, the continuous service must have a substantial connection with the state to qualify for an entitlement to long service leave. Given Mr. Gade's work prior to coming to Australia wouldn't qualify as having a substantial connection, had his employment finished while in Victoria, he would not have qualified for long service leave. Fortunately for Mr. Gade, however, during his notice period and after resigning, he requested that he be relocated to Queensland to serve out part of his notice period. Mr. Gade eventually worked in Queensland for 18 days. Under the Queensland legislation, an employee simply needs to have completed 10 years of continuous service with the same employer, whether wholly in the state or partly in and partly outside of the state. Therefore, given Mr. Dade was completing his service in Queensland, the Queensland Industrial Relations Commission concluded that the entire duration of qualifying continuous service had to be considered for long service leave purposes. Effectively, Mr. Gade's 18 days of service in Queensland saw him awarded $11,000 in long service leave to which he wouldn't otherwise have been entitled. Infosys has continued to appeal the decision, appealing to the Supreme Court of Queensland's Court of Appeal in April this year, who upheld the QIRC decision. They then appealed to the High Court for special leave to appeal the Court of Appeal judgment. However, this month that final avenue was closed down when the High Court refused special leave, finding no reason to doubt the unanimous decision and that the appeal had insufficient prospects of success. And this case once again reminds us of the complexity of long service leave around the country and the need to be aware of the nuances that exist in each state. And that's it for our October edition of This Month in Payroll, and also for me. After 35 years at PwC and over 10 years advising on payroll, on 28th of November, I will be retiring from the firm. We started This Month in Payroll in June 2018. It was an idea of Margaret Kersagaras, who has been invaluable over the years in helping me build my market presence, coming up with all sorts of scary ideas. I was encouraged to launch this monthly podcast by Tracy Angwin, who helped us set up the PwC Payroll Advisory practice over a decade ago, and for the last 4 years, I've gratefully shared this role with Claire Soccio. When we proposed the idea of a monthly podcast, we were advised not to proceed, on the basis that we wouldn't be able to find something to talk about that is payroll-related each month. Well, 7 years and 79 episodes later, we're still going strong. Every month, without fail, apart from Christmas. The first episode of TMIP focused on the introduction of single-touch payroll, the launch of an amnesty offering SG penalty concessions, and the complexity created by Victorian long service leave changes. My last episode of TMIP has focused on the introduction of Payday Super, which includes some transitional SG penalty concessions, and a case on the complexity of Queensland versus Victorian long service leave. So, progress. It might be Claire and myself talking to you each month. However, there is a team behind us, including Brooke LaForest, who prepares the slides each month and tells Claire and myself when we're talking for too long. And Adam Stevens and Andrew Bennett are sound engineers who make Claire and myself sound way better on the mic than we would otherwise. Behind them, there is a whole team who, each month, jump into action to make sure these recordings are proofed, packaged and distributed by the last day of the month. Thank you to all of them. And thank you to everyone who listens to TMIP each month. Claire and I do value the feedback we receive from those in the payroll community regarding this month in payroll. We particularly love the positive things we hear. It has been my privilege to be afforded your time each month to talk about payroll. Claire will of course be carrying on TMIP in future months, and you may find some new voices joining her. In the meantime, and for one last time, if you would like to revisit any of our prior updates, they are available on our website at pwc.com.au/payroll. And if you have any questions or need for support, please reach out to, well, not me, but your usual PwC contact. And all the best for the future.